you a home grower looking for a little bit of help? Are you ready to learn as much as you can about your favorite hobby? The Homegrown Helpers brings you informative interviews from experienced growers that have taken the next steps in their journey and decided to help you grow top quality cannabis all in your home. Now welcome in our host, Rob Smith, along with this week's Homegrown Helper.
And welcome to the show, everyone. Are you ready for this week's grow tips and tricks from another homegrown helper? All right, me too. What an amazing interview I have for you today. Erin from Cascadia Farms joined me for a great conversation. So great that I made her late for her next meeting, even after rushing through the bonus questions. Speaking of bonus questions, don't forget you can download those at thehomegrownhelpers.com/bonus and gain access to the last 5 questions we ask each one of our guests. We've been making lots of introductions lately, so if you need a helping hand from someone, please reach out. Let us do some of the work for you and help you find the right consultant for your grow type, size, and most importantly, your personality. Email me at rob@thehomegrownhelpers.com to get the process started. There's no fee, so just email and ask, see if we can help you out. Also, don't forget that the prices are going up on September 1st on our Grow Pass memberships. They're going up to $14.95 for veg level and $29.95 for the bloom level. We just released a resources section and are working on a new partnership with a previous guest of the Homegrown Helpers here to get you more info and resources to make your membership even more valuable. If you've been on the fence, now is the time to act. Again, prices go up September 1st, and if you sign up before then, you're guaranteed to get 2 entries into the 5K quarterly giveaway done on October 1st. That is a boatload of prizes from all of our vendor partners, with first place being over $2,000 in value, with a host of prizes from each one of our vendors. The way this works is veg members get 1 entry per billing cycle and bloom members get 2. So you could get up to 4 entries and win one of our amazing prizes if you join by September 1st. We have to thank our mygrowpass.com sponsors for today's show, the High Times senior cultivation editor, Danny Danko, and his new book, Cannabis, A Beginner's Guide to Growing Marijuana, along with the amazing Dr. Zymes, maker of a multi-purpose cleaner and an all-natural eliminator, which is a revolutionary green solution that kills and eliminates soft-bodied insects. Now, let's welcome in today's homegrown helper, Erin Lapsansky. Welcome to the show, Erin.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Erin, why don't you start off with an easy one? Tell us where you're from and how long you've been growing cannabis.
Okay. I grew up in Ferndale, Washington, which is Washington State, I guess I should clarify. Ferndale is basically north of Seattle by 2 hours. And I went to high school there. Then I went and got my research biology degree at Gonzaga University. And then I went to Colorado State University and got my master's degree in horticulture and landscape architecture. And as soon as I was done with that, and I realized I wanted to move back to the Pacific Northwest. So I came back, and 3 days after I got back, I started working for Cascadia Gardens. So I've been there for 3.5 years. I started with the company when they were only 15 months old. So I've been doing it, been growing cannabis ever since. It was actually the first time I'd seen a cannabis plant, though. So
Really?
Yeah. It was interesting. I interviewed off-site. And they liked me enough to bring me to the greenhouse operation that they were currently running and showed me 14-foot tall Dutch tree cannabis plants and totally blew my mind. So that's where I started.
So from your days growing up in Washington, which is obviously a recreational illegal state, and then going to college in Colorado, you had never seen a cannabis plant before working at Cascadia Gardens.
No, I mean, that's not entirely true because I did see one cannabis plant in somebody's closet when I was at Gonzaga, but it wasn't flowering. So it just looked like a house plant to
Right.
me. Yeah.
But
so
it was
that
in the closet, so you had to
it was
guess
in the
something was
closet.
going on.
Yeah. Actually, the guy invited me over to help him try and save it. And I had no clue. I was like, maybe you're overwatering it. I don't know. Yeah, it was a good time.
That is wild.
Yeah.
So are you a consumer of cannabis now?
Yeah, so I hadn't been a consumer until I started at Cascadia, and for the longest time I still wasn't. I'd say it took me about a year and a half, but as I just got more comfortable with the diversification of each of the cultivars, and I recognized the different terpene profiles that they were putting off, and I heard from someone that if one of the plants smells really good to you, then its chemistry is going to react well with your body chemistry. And so I decided to give it a shot, and now I smoke pretty frequently, but I still leave it to the end of the day, just to wind down kind of thing. So
That's interesting
Yeah.
about the terpene profile. I'd never really heard it related like that.
yeah,
I guess I'm in
Yeah,
trouble
it's kinda
because there's only 5% of cannabis strains that really turn me off.
yeah, you're kind of in trouble. Yeah.
So you started Full Spectrum Consulting, which I love the name of, really, keys into probably what you do and the plant that we're going after.
Mhm.
How long ago did you start that?
So Full Spectrum is actually a group project that I do with my friend Dave, my friend and the owner of Cascadia, actually. Dave, who he works really, really well with retailers, and he does a lot of retail consulting. So that's a really cool component of the company. My friend Nick is also an owner of Cascadia. He is super detail oriented about traceability and things of that nature. So he consults on that front. And then my friend Eli, he consults on packaging and processing. And then there's me, and I consult on the growing end. So Full Spectrum started probably a little over a year ago, just when we were noticing all these gaps in people's knowledge, especially considering Washington State isn't vertically integrated. So we wanted to help people, help cultivators understand what retailers are looking for, help retailers understand the obstacles that the producer and packager person is facing, things like that. So yeah, we've gone to a couple conferences, we've consulted for a couple different operations. We basically do project-based though. So if you're not looking for somebody to help you with your retail acquisition and you're only looking for somebody to help you with cultivation, then I would just go in by myself, which is kind of cool. So it's very flexible in that way.
That's awesome. Kind of goes along with the name, Full Spectrum Consulting, and that's really, really cool.
Yeah, definitely. I really enjoy it.
So I would assume, or maybe I shouldn't assume, but do you have a current grow setup of your own?
Yeah, so I can talk about both my grow operations. Cascadia is a tier 2 producer processor, which means we're allowed to have up to 10,000 square feet of canopy. We're running about 7,000 right now, and that's in 4 generative rooms, so 4 flowering rooms and 1 vegetative room. We grow in soil. We're organic based, and I use my background in rhizosphere biology to do most of the pest management. So that means spraying microbes rather than spraying synthetics. And then for my own personal use, I'm actually a medical card holder in Washington State. I have a chronic migraine disorder, which has been a bummer, but cannabis has really, really helped. So I have 15 plants in, my friends call it the spaceship grow because my grow room is 100% reflective. It has sheet metal flooring that goes up the walls about 4 inches.
Interesting.
And then the walls are completely reflective because it's just that sheet foam that I turned the opposite direction.
Yep.
So the reflective side is facing out or into my grow room.
Totally.
And then that's the walls and the ceiling. So it's very bright. It's a very bright room.
So you're maximizing the light spectrums that you do have in place.
Yeah, I do. I run LEDs, and I run older LEDs that we discontinued at Cascadia. So I kind of need all the help I can get in that area.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I gotta ask, why the reflective floor? I'm sure there's a reason.
Rats. So I wasn't looking for the reflective floor necessarily. I was looking for protection from rats.
Okay.
Just because my medical is on a farm, and we have rat problems out in this area all the time. We have pretty mild winters, and they'll chew through the walls and get into your grow, and they eat the outer layer of flesh around the base of your plant, and you'll just lose your whole crop to rats eating it, like basically girdling all of your plants.
Wow.
Yeah, it's terrible. It happened in our outdoor, actually, which was obnoxious.
Yeah, I can understand the outdoor, but they dig right through the walls and
Oh, they're hungry.
can they like smell the cannabis growing and know that they like it on the other side?
Yeah, I have a carbon filter and a negative pressure set up, so it's not super noticeable, but they still find it. So I went with a metal floor just to avoid that problem altogether.
Totally. Now, I always thought, I have a product called Atlas Plant Trainer. It's a customizable click-together tomato cage for the home grower.
Right.
And one of my ideas was to have some reflective panels that attach to the side of the structure. Because the light penetration from a light only goes down so far. And I guess I got the idea from commercial cultivation facilities, outside of cannabis, that would allow their seedlings to pop up through that reflective white plastic.
Yeah.
So that any light that made it down past the plant was reflected back up.
Totally.
But it doesn't sound like your plants are probably not that close to the floor, that the reflective flooring makes that big of a difference in your spectrums and pars that reach back to the plant.
Yeah, and I also don't thin, and I use the sea of green technique.
Yep.
So I don't really have any light penetration past bud formation.
Okay.
So it's not doing a whole lot, maybe a little bit in the aisleway, because I just run 2 rows on the sides and then walkway down the middle.
Yep.
But that's probably.
Okay. So let's dig into that room a little bit while you're on that topic.
Sure.
So you have 15 plants. You grow with LEDs, but you take a more of a sea of green approach.
Yeah.
Can you tell us, kind of the size of the room and the size of the rows?
Yeah. So it's actually kind of a small room for 15 plants, just based on the way I was taught to grow. It's a 8x16, and my AC unit takes up probably, 4 square feet of that. So I run 2 aisles that are about 4 feet. Approximately 4 feet in width, and then close to 12 feet long. So really big plants. I grow in 15-gallon pots.
Nice.
And it tends to work pretty well. The aisle down the center gets smaller and smaller,
Sure.
tighter and tighter. So I have to pull the pots towards the aisle so that I can even see them by the end of the cycle. But
nice.
It works out. Yeah, I have 9 of the Illumatex Neosols are the lights I'm running, but wouldn't recommend anybody go buy those. They just came to me free. So
there's nothing wrong with free grow equipment.
Nothing wrong with free grow equipment.
That shit gets expensive.
Oh yeah, and it's an energy saver just to have LEDs. So I definitely recommend LEDs, but those are an old model.
Yeah, and it definitely cuts down on your energy consumption for that large AC unit you have in the corner, right?
Yeah, it's it's an AC dehumidifier, so at least I'm cutting down that way. But
okay, good.
Yeah.
So you have a grower coming to you, and they are looking for some guidance in improving their plant health, or what would be your suggestions or the top 1 or 2 things that they should look at when it comes to the overall health of a plant?
I think that good watering practices is something that people just don't learn early enough. They get way too technical with all the additives. They get way too technical with the sprays. They get too technical with media and stuff like that. And again, I grow in soil, so it's not like I'm running an automatic drip or anything. I hand water everything. So just going through and learning when a pot is actually all the way dry and what a pot is actually fully saturated. The roots have to perform respiration just like animals do. So they need oxygen to be able to perform the functions that they need to. And if you're drowning the roots, then you're not going to get the full productive potential of that plant.
So about the oxygen that plant roots need, do you suggest a heavier dosage of perlite in your soil?
I actually use Fox Farms Ocean Forest soil in both my operations. and it's really heavy, I think. But part of the reason I do that is because I can go longer in between watering and really let the plant utilize everything in that pot. But if you were to amend it, I would definitely add more perlite to it. It's just a little heavy, but in terms of my needs for time, it works out better for me to have it a little heavier.
Yeah. So you go a little bit longer in between waterings.
Yeah.
So it's not so much work.
Right. It's not so much work. And I think that's good for root growth too. You know, like part of healthy roots is looking for nutrients, looking for water. So it's better to have a longer gap than to be watering them every single day.
You said you grow in 15-gallon pots and grow some decently large plants.
Yeah.
What is the sweet spot for you with the watering? Because I think there's a balance between, like, we don't want to water every day, but we also don't want such small plants and such large plant pots that we're watering once a week.
Right.
What do you think that sweet spot is?
So I adjust my watering time based on how long the plants have been in flowering and how long since the transplant. So initially, when I do a transplant, I transplant a 1-gallon pot into that 15-gallon pot. I water the plant in very, very heavily, and then I don't touch it for at least 6 days. Yep. I don't come back and water it for at least 6 days. And then
those are like the best 6 days.
Those are the best 6 days. Yeah, totally. Yep. And that's, it's important to make sure that you're covering the plug just a teeny tiny bit during those, during your transplant, because if you've exposed your plug, then you really screwed those 6 days up, because you're going to have to come back and make sure your plug hasn't dried out before the whole pot has dried out. That's a big problem for people. So I'm not saying submerge 2 inches. You don't want to go up the stem too much, but make sure you have a nice little layer. Otherwise, your plug's going to dry out before your pot's going to dry out.
Oh, good tip.
Yeah. But I would say the sweet spot for a 15-gallon is about every 2.5 days, which I know sounds weird, but I'm in my room every day lifting up the pots and figuring out how heavy they are. So if I have to spot water a room every day, I'm not going to hit every plant every day, but I'm going to check the needs of the plants every single day. That's, again, another product of hand watering and not being on a timer or an automated system like that.
Now, I used to grow in 10-gallon pots. Currently, I don't have my own grow set up because we're renting down here in Massachusetts.
Bummer.
Yeah, I know, but I told you that it's pretty much okay that I'm not growing. It'd be brutal for me to grow my own cannabis and not be able to consume any of it at this point in time.
Totally.
So I'm wondering if you ever cheat when you're growing, when you're watering, and instead of doing a full watering on that 1 or 2 plants out of your 15 that might need it, if you might give them just a little bit of water and then do a full room watering when the rest of the plants are more ready for it.
Gotcha. Did you say treat?
I said cheat.
Oh, cheat.
So like I would only like if I had 15 plants in a room and say 2 or 3 of them needed water, but the rest of them could go another day.
Yeah.
I might only you
might try and synchronize is what you're saying.
Yeah, I might give those 3 plants maybe a cup of water to make sure that they got through the whole next day.
Right.
And then the next day I'd give the entire room water to try and get them on the same schedule.
Yeah. I definitely do that in a larger operation.
Yep.
Especially because you're trying to synchronize certain treatments. Like if you're doing a microbial treatment, I don't want to mix up a microbial treatment for, my whole room and only apply it to half the plants, have it die overnight or something like that.
Right.
But for the most part, I try to avoid that. It's either I save 15 minutes today and maybe reduce my yields, or I just do it. I just do what the plants need.
Right on.
Yeah.
So in your opinion, Erin, what is the single highest leverage move a grower can do in order to increase yields? Now, let me preface this with, we do focus on the home growers here.
Yeah.
And generally, we're all limited by the number of plants that we can grow legally. So getting more out of a single plant is important.
Yeah.
So can you structure the answer around, increasing yield off of, our limited plant counts?
Certainly. Yeah. Honestly, I think the biggest thing is lollipopping. And I don't know what terminology everybody uses for that, but
we use shaving the legs.
Shaving the legs. There you go.
With the Growcast family.
Okay. Then shaving the legs. That's the biggest thing I've seen just for increasing yield off of one plant. If you It's an energy use allocation analysis, essentially. So if you want big, chunky, yummy nugs, you need to make sure that they're not making little tiny wispy larvae. And so shave those legs up harder than you think you should, and shave them up early. A lot of people top and then start training super, super young. I'm down for that. But make sure you get a super even canopy and have it only be, in my opinion, only like 4 inches thick, and just a sheet of photosynthetic area, and trim up everything below that.
What is your opinion on the full defoliation, or the schwazzing as they call it?
Yeah, I just, from my background in horticulture, I just can't imagine that removing photosynthetic capacity is actually going to impart higher yields. I've done it for certain cultivars. Certain cultivars need you to do it because of the mold risk. So I run an alien orange cookies, and that thing will just literally melt if you don't defoliate it and get more air circulation to the bud sites. Mm-hmm. But I still leave a layer of photosynthetic area that fills up, the full square footage of my net. So I don't know. I've been told I'm wrong so many times about that. but if people want to do it, go for it. In my experience with it, I can't imagine that removing the enzymes, removing, the tissue that is supposed to be making you sugars is going to improve your yield. I don't know.
Yeah, I think one of the key parts to being successful with that is obviously the leaves grow back. And if you've watched any of those time-lapse videos that 3Light puts out, those leaves seemingly are back within a couple of days. But the advice that I give to people is, aside from the photosynthesis aspect, you're removing the stored food that the plant has, tucked away. Yeah. So you as the grower need to supplement the food with a strong foliar spray and the right nutrient regimen for that plant at that specific time. And I think that's where a lot of growers end up falling down, is not having the right nutrient levels for the plant to draw either in the foliar or up from the soil, and they don't supplement properly, so the plant ends up suffering because they don't have the stored nutrients to draw from.
Yeah, and that totally makes sense. I would counter and say that do you want your plant to be spending energy replacing leaves, or do you want your plant to be spending energy building buds? So whether or not you give it enough nutrients, I don't know. It's again, one of those energy use, not like things that I think about.
So anybody that's ever listened to any podcast that I've ever been on knows that I am a huge plant energy person. With my product and my background and the things that I focus on, it's all about allowing that plant to expend energy at the right times in bud production. And really, as the grower, you do everything you can to conserve all of that energy for that time.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to one of the first things that you said with your interview at Cascadia Gardens. They brought you into a room, maybe it was a greenhouse, with 14-foot tall plants.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the balance of plant height and energy expenditure, bringing nutrients and water up from the soil up 14 feet tall?
Oh, well, I mean, that's just adhesion and cohesion. That's a passive thing. It's not like a cardiovascular system is pumping movement of those nutrients in the water up through the vasculature. So that's an interesting question. I would never grow a 14-foot tall plant again. Let me tell you that.
Okay, good.
That was a labor nightmare. But that was a labor nightmare. That's all I can say about that. That same thing happened at our outdoor. It was a labor nightmare. Keep your plants manageable. Otherwise, you're not going to grow any more. You're not going to yield any higher when you have a 14-foot tall plant that has, no light penetration at all. Right. And you also can't spray it. And you also probably can't water it enough. And you also can't harvest it yourself. You're going to have you and your mom and your dad and your brother and everybody come in and help you harvest the dang thing. So maybe that's just like the business mindset of me thinking, but.
So that's a different energy expenditure. That's our energy expenditure.
Yeah. Don't do that to yourself. Don't do it. No. That's a bad time.
So I guess in an outdoor setting or maybe even a greenhouse, the quality of light doesn't decrease greatly from 14 feet from the ground down to 1 foot from the ground.
Right.
But in an indoor setting, I have seen, lots of places that have 8, 10, 12 foot tall plants inside, and they lollipop the bottom 3/4 of that plant because they're not getting the light penetration that they're looking for.
Right.
But I've always thought that that plant is expending some unnecessary energy to keep that wasted 8 feet of growth alive and functioning in order to get the energy or the nutrients in the water up from the soil to where it goes.
Yeah, I mean, it's supporting more tissue than it needs to support, essentially. So it's the same reason I don't run fans on my plants. I don't want them to reinforce their stems for support. I don't want them to worry about having to hold themselves up against this fan blowing on them all the time. So yeah, I try and grow plants that just grow into the net within, a foot maybe, and grow a full sheet so that they don't have, like you're saying, just all that extra tissue down below that's really not serving a huge purpose. But I think in my experience, when I've seen that done, people are generally not trellis netting. They're using staking to support their plant.
Yep.
So, it's a little bit of a difference.
And that's the wasted energy on our part of having to support that huge, monstrous plant with staking, because, there's no way that those branches are going to be strong enough 12 feet in the air to support the heavy bud that you're looking to grow.
Yeah, no, it's important to remember that your time is valuable as well. And if you are spending all this time, moving around a step ladder to look at your bud sites, like that's not a good use of your time. And then you're cutting into your success, essentially, in my opinion.
Amazing tips.
Yeah.
And we have to take a quick break to thank our mygrowpass.com sponsors. Danny Denko, the senior cultivation editor over at High Times, has just written a new book called Cannabis, A Beginner's Guide to Growing Marijuana. And he wanted to give back to our community a little bit. So he joined us in offering up his book to be signed for Bloom level members only. This is a great book for beginners and the experienced grower alike, because even experienced growers know that you must keep learning in order to stay on top of your game. Grab a book for yourself on Amazon by going to growcastpodcast.com/Denko. Or if you're a mygrowpass.com member, all you have to do is email us at contact@growcastpodcast.com. Let us know you're interested in buying one of those books, and we'll help facilitate the process. Also, we have the amazing Dr. Zymes, which gives Growcast listeners 10% off, but our members get 25% off the amazing Dr. Zymes Eliminator along with their multi-purpose cleaner. They've given away a bunch of product to each one of our prizes for the 5K giveaway. So if you're interested in trying some of their products, use GrowCast10 for 10% off at checkout. The amazing Dr. Zymes Eliminator is a revolutionary green solution that kills and eliminates soft-bodied insects, molds, and mildews on your indoor or outdoor gardens. It's a proprietary formula handcrafted to ensure quality control. Professional growers use it all year to ensure pest-free, mildew-free plants. Many growers have realized an increase in yield by not having to combat pests and mildews with toxic or oil-based products, and that when used as a preventative, they do not see any pests or mildews, even up to the day of harvest. OMRI listed and approved for organic gardening practices. Check out the amazing Dr. Zymes and score yourself 10% off using code GROWCAST10 at checkout. www.drzymes.com. And welcome back to the show, guys. We have Erin Lapsansky here dropping all sorts of plant energy, and she's definitely talking my style here. So loving this conversation, Erin. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
So, Erin, let's talk about integrated pest management in an indoor garden. What are your protocols and your go-to items to keep your garden and plants clean and healthy?
Great question. So I try and mimic the environment the cannabis evolved in. That's what I would say.
Yep.
So I'm trying to do it as natural as possible. That's why I grow in soil. When you're indoors, that's kind of an obstacle. You know, lighting is the biggest thing that is going to be different from the spectrum of the sun. But there are a lot of really fancy lights that can mimic that. For pest management, though, I still use that same mentality. Like, how did this plant defend itself when it was evolving? So it goes back to microbes. I think that there's an interesting analogy for it, where if you look at the plant as a dinner table, you can have any number of players sitting around this dinner table. You can have negative, like detrimental microbes sitting around the dinner table feeding on your plant, or you can fill those seats with beneficial microbes. You can fill the space, and then the microbes that are negative would have to displace those positive microbes in order to even have a seat. So in my garden, I really, really emphasize healthy roots and a healthy rhizosphere. And the rhizosphere is the space mere microns from the roots, from the root hairs. And I try and fill that space with beneficial microbes. Same thing with leaf tissue and bud tissue. I don't spray too close to harvest. I would never spray later than 6 weeks. The 5th week would be the last time I sprayed anything, just because adding that moisture to your bud site is never a good thing. But I'll spray beneficial microbes to protect the leaf tissue, protect the root tissue, and if I have to, I'll bring in other biocontrol agents like insects and things like that. But I'm sure anybody who's used those before knows how hard it is to keep them alive in an indoor garden.
Well, not keeping them alive is a good sign that you don't have really that many problems, right? Like
Well, yeah, but I've seen so many of them just kill themselves in my life. It's just a real bummer. Fair enough. Just commit suicide right away.
Yeah, they're drawn to that light, that's for sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So you are getting ready to work with a new grower. What are the characteristics that are most important for a grower to succeed, that when you see them, you are absolutely jazzed to be able to work with that person?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Growers in this industry, in my experience, can be very arrogant. I just did interviews yesterday, actually, and there are a lot of people who come to me and they're like, I know exactly what I'm doing. I know how to do this. And I don't want that. I don't like that. The industry is constantly changing and evolving. And maybe, this is a trait imparted on me by going to school and being told I was wrong over and over and over again in research. But, you can't know it all. You just can't know it all. So I really look for people who are open-minded to new protocols, to doing things the opposite that they've been doing them, to, doing the research and not listening to everything a blog or like a Reddit feed necessarily tells them, but going into the foundational scholarly articles and trying to figure out what they're saying in those articles. I know that's difficult sometimes because they are not easy to understand.
For sure.
But yeah, just really do your research and be open to being wrong. Sometimes you're wrong. It's okay.
I think human nature makes it hard for most people to admit that they were wrong in anything.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
But you're right. Ego plays such a huge part in the growing cannabis realm that, people want to grow the best bud and, show off a bud, and people are like, oh, that's the best, thing that I've ever smelt.
Oh, yeah.
And that feeds the ego. Mm-hmm. So, you kind of like, it goes hand in hand with the other ego of like, I know exactly what I'm doing to get the results that I want in the garden.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm.
But like you said, there's so much research that's being done and so many new products and so many different variables that can be introduced that not any one person is able to know everything about this plant. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important that we keep reminding ourselves about that and keep reminding other growers around us about that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So, Erin, last tough question here for you, at least during this part. And we do have 5 more questions that we post on our bonus content at thehomegrownhelpers.com/bonus. And you can head on over there and get access to the rest of the interview here with Erin and all of our other guests on the previous interviews of the Homegrown Helpers. So, Erin, any last bits of wisdom or tips or tricks that you'd like to give to every grower listening to you right now?
Yeah, definitely. The biggest thing that I can encourage people to do is stop being distracted by marketing ploys on your products. So stop buying products with cartoon characters on the label and stop buying products that are just cannabis specific. Look for a company that has been growing plants for a long time. Look for a white label product that is just telling you exactly what it's going to do. And, we're spending so much extra money. People are spending so much extra money because, it's the cannabis market, it's this special plant. But it is a special plant. Don't get me wrong. But you can save yourself a lot of headache and a lot of money by looking at what people do in big ag, looking at what people do in, different cultivation operations, and just go from there,
So that kind of loops in our last couple of questions here. With your background and a statement that I just made that there's so much new research that's being done with the cannabis plant, do you feel that, and to steal a line from a previous interviewee, everything old is new again? And by that, I mean, like, are we just repeating research on the cannabis plant that's already been done on tomatoes and avocados and all the other, plants that we grow? Are we just repeating the same types of steps and finding out the same types of things?
Yes and no.
Okay.
We are totally, we're learning to grow a new plant. And the thing about it is, just like tomatoes, just like potatoes, just like all those plants, we have done artificial selection on these plants for so long. So a great example is, why do all plants love gavitas? Like, why do all plants grow so well under the gavita spectrum? And the reason is, we've always been growing under gavitas. We do all our breeding under gavitas. So when we have a high yielder, when we have a positive outcome, it's because that plant likes that spectrum. And so now, it's almost like we've directed their evolution. We really have done that. So yeah, we are able to pull from other information and other ag-based, other crops, things like that. But we also have to be mindful that we've directed the genetic selection of these plants for a really long time. So they are going to behave differently due to that. I think it's going to be a big shift soon to start looking for plants that grow well under LED spectrum, for example, to start, breeding plants specifically for outdoor cultivation, to breed plants specifically for indoor cultivation. But if I could tell anybody to go into any field, it would be plant breeding, because let me tell you, those people are stale old men in their 80s at this point. They're all retiring and dying, and we need people to go to school for plant breeding, and we need people to be knowledgeable about plant genetics. And the cannabis industry especially needs it. So if anybody's looking for a project, that's the one I would encourage.
So that brings up a kind of off-the-wall question for you. How do you feel about the whole Phylos bioscience thing and what they're trying to do?
I'm not super familiar with that. It sounds like they're just making a genetic bank. Is that kind of, can you maybe give me an overview of it?
Yeah, so that's what they started off with. And the controversy was that now that they have over 4,000 samples in this genetic bank, that they, aside from what they, or contrary to what they have told breeders and growers for the last 5 years of collecting these samples from them, they're going to start their own breeding program. And they, the CEO did an investor pitch at a Benzinga forum that was recorded. And he basically said that they have a 5-year head start that no other company would be able to replicate, that they basically have a huge barrier to entry to creating the super strains of cannabis that would be used in commercial cultivation everywhere. And in a matter of years, there would not be any commercial growers that weren't growing their strains because they were going to be able to breed based off a resistance to powdery mildew or specifically to grow under LED lights or in an outdoor setting or that type of thing.
So did they collect that information when they collected the genetics, though? Because if they don't grow those plants out themselves, they're going to have no idea which ones are powdery mildew resistant and which ones are high yielder.
So they have some basic information, but they also have the genetic mapping of those.
Yeah.
So they as far as I know, they intended on starting with the basics and then working their way through to combine some of the strains that they have on file to make those super strains.
Well, so I can say I have done a similar thing with genetic mapping, where you're looking at a DNA sequence of a gene, and you're going to compare it to a gene bank that goes over all plants. And hopefully somebody has identified that gene to impart that characteristic.
Right.
If somebody hasn't done that foundational work, though, they're really not that far ahead of anybody else, because you're going to have to do so much bioinformatics work to identify which genes are imparting which benefits. And if it's a quantitative trait if it's a qualitative trait, if it's multiple genes imparting that benefit, they're going to have to find 5 or 6 genes that are giving that powdery mildew resistance benefit to that cultivar. And then they're going to have to try and figure out a way to make sure that those 6 genes get moved through independent assortment and segregation through sex, which is super random and super crazy, into the offspring. And then they're going to have to stabilize it. So really, it's a great idea. It was a great sales pitch, but I think they're missing a lot of foundational work it's going to take some time to get that understanding of the genes, just understanding of what information they have. They have to do a lot of data mining, essentially. That's going to be a long, strenuous road. So good luck to them. But I think that people who are breeding, like in the traditional sense, are going to be getting there just as fast.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know the extent of the work that they've done behind the scenes.
True. They could have been working on it.
Yeah. And, honestly, from what I've gathered, this has kind of been their business model from day number one.
Okay.
But what they have done is for the last 5 years, lie to all the breeders and cultivators and say that they would never be their competition.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they were like, oh, guess what? We are going to be your competition.
Yeah.
And in the cannabis industry, that really rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And in my opinion, rightfully so.
Certainly. Yeah. So much of business in the cannabis industry is done on just a handshake and good faith.
Yep.
So that's a really shisty thing to do if that's what they ended up doing. Yeah. Unfortunate. Mm-hmm.
So, thank you for your thoughts on that. I know that was kind of a curveball there at the end.
No, I liked it. That was fun.
Good. So, Erin, how can our audience learn more from you, find you, and connect with you?
So I'm on Instagram. Erin.Cascadia is my account. I don't have a full spectrum account yet. So that's a great way to reach out to me, or you can just email me with my name, Erin.Lapsansky @gmail. And I'm on my laptop or my phone 100% of the time, all the time. So you can reach me there.
Man.
Oh, also, hey, actually, I'm sorry. I'm also speaking at the Grow Up Conference in Toronto in September, if anybody wants to come check it out.
The Grow Up Conference?
Grow Up Conference, yes. So it's specifically for home growers, actually. You should look into it.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah, I think I'm giving a home growers workshop.
Awesome. I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, definitely.
I was just hung up that you have your name at gmail.com.
Yeah.
My name's Robert Smith, and there was no, I can't get Rob Smith 1 million.
Anything.
Yeah, anything really. But it has served its benefits over time. I was in Atlantic City and couldn't find a hotel room to stay in. Everything was booked up. We were at a concert.
Oh, man.
And so I walked into a hotel and said, hey, I'm Bob Smith here to rent my room.
Oh, my gosh.
And they gave me a room. I paid for it, but it wasn't my room.
Yeah.
And I assume whoever Bob Smith was that I took their room from, they gave them some other room when they actually checked in. So
probably.
I never got booted, and that was the important part.
That was genius. That was very smart.
Yeah, well, it's pretty much the one time that my very generic name has paid off for me. I've never been able to avoid a bill that way. So.
No, yeah.
So to wrap this up, before we get on to the bonus content, if you liked what you heard, we really appreciate if you give us a rating and review on your favorite podcast app. Sharing this with a friend if you really liked what Erin or any of our other guests were all about goes a long way as well. So thank you, Erin, and we are going to get back with our bonus content in just a little bit. Happy growing, guys.